Maybe this sounds familiar. You dream of creating amazing work like your heroes, but the pressure of perfectionism leaves you stuck, procrastinating, and unsure how to move forward. You might not realize that this mindset is also holding back your growth. So in this video, I will show you how famous artists and creatives combat perfectionism to create great work, and why it might be easier than you think. But to do what your heroes do, you need a mindset shift. Does any of this sound familiar? The project I'm working on is going to define me, my style, my future, my career, and my reputation. I'm going to get hate comments. I already know what they will say. Or even worse, nobody will care. They might even ignore me. I've had all of those thoughts, and they still pop up from time to time. The problem I find is seeing the project you're working on as your final masterpiece, like it's going to define you. This way of thinking will make you overthink every single choice and detail you do. The focus should be to get into a state of flow where you can create without overjudging every single decision you are making. Probably the biggest problem with perfectionism is the pressure you put on yourself to achieve an impossibly high standard. Striving for excellence is not necessarily an issue. The problem comes when you haven't defined what that is, what it looks like, which means you can keep adding, adjusting, and improving your work with no end in sight. In addition to this, the ambition you set for yourself might be so high that it will paralyze you moving forward. And at every step towards this impossible goal, you might feel like a failure, because whatever you do, your desired outcomes still might be out of reach, which could result in you giving up instead of finishing something. I love watching documentaries or listening to artists talking about their process. An example I keep coming back to is Ed Sheeran. Not only does he have crazy good work ethic, he writes constantly, often multiple songs a day. He has said in interviews that so many of the songs he writes are terrible. He uses this metaphor. Writing songs is like turning on a dirty tap. When you turn it on, it's going to come out with mud and dirt. But if you keep the tap running, eventually it will start flowing clear. The first songs you write might not be great, but if you keep going, you will get to the good ones. It's very similar to a quote by Chuck Jones, who was an animator on Looney Tunes. Every artist has thousands of bad drawings in them, and the only way to get rid of them is to draw them out. The world might not see everything you create, so treat it as a practice, like a painter sketching, experimenting with new techniques to improve their craft. Most masterpieces weren't created because the artist set out to make a masterpiece. For example, the singer from Metallica didn't even want to show the band the song Nothing Else Matters, because he thought it was terrible. The drummer convinced him it was good, and now it's one of their most iconic songs. The mindset shifts comes when we start to look at each project as a practice, and that we get to do something we love. Focus on the process, focus on getting better, not comparing your work to everyone else's. Focus on getting the bad work out so you can get to the good. It's about being oriented towards growth in your craft instead of perfection. If you go for perfection, you run the risk of blocking your growth, or at least slowing it down. Maybe you have been in this situation, where you spend months or even years on the same project, tweaking, removing, and adding things. This can lead to feeling overwhelmed with frustration or doubt that begins to grow in yourself or your skills. When dragged out, this can often lead to burning out, a spiral of second guessing, or even worse, losing the love you have for creating. All of that combined can make your art a source of stress instead of something you enjoy, which is of course the opposite of what we want. So to take the pressure off yourself, you need to lower your expectations or build some constraints around your work. The digital artist Mike Winkelmann, aka Beeple, known for selling the most expensive NFT ever sold and creating and posting a piece of art every day for more than 17 years. This process of creating every day has clearly made his art develop into a very specific style. He knows what he puts out every day isn't perfect or completely polished. Keeps him accountable, improves his craft, and develops his voice and style day by day. He purposely continues to sort of fail and make mistakes in public, which sort of diffuses the tension of whatever people say about his work, because he knows it's part of improving his craft and that he gets to try again tomorrow. His process is almost the opposite of perfection. The reason why Beeple is a great example is because he puts such concrete constraints around his work. He only has 24 hours to finish each piece. And that might be extreme, but having a deadline and building some constraints when you work helps you not only make choices and figure out what's essential, but it makes you feel like you are progressing and gives you the opportunity to start or experiment with something new. So focus on what you can do to grow and get better at your craft, and lowering expectations so you can move forward and keep some momentum going by finishing something. And remember to fail often. Experimenting and playing is giving yourself permission to make mistakes. This fear of not doing the right thing and playing by the imaginary rules when you are creating paralyzes you. When you compare your art to others all the time, thinking it's not good enough, or thinking you have to do something a certain way, you remove the joy of creating. If you are focused on perfection and of the end result, you risk losing the reason why you are even making art in the first place. The joy of creating is of course different to everyone, but I think most of you will agree that there is a childlike quality of play where you aren't judging or thinking too much, but letting your mind act freely. Add this mindset to the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, which is the art of small consistent steps towards improvement. It's about progress over perfection, showing up every single day and refining as you go. Trusting your intuition and that your mistakes or failures are just small continuous improvements that lead to big transformations over time. So look at each project as a chance to experiment and grow. As Scott Adams, the creator of the comic strip Dilbert, have said, creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. So the key takeaways are this. Look at each project you do as a practice, and that it gives you the opportunity to do more of something you enjoy. Focus on improving by letting yourself play and experiment, instead of the pressure of creating polished work at each turn. Get the bad work out of your system so you can get to the good. Continue to create as often as you can. Lower your expectations so you can build momentum and get the satisfaction of finishing something. Getting the small wins of finishing something will in turn give you the motivation and the belief that you can do it again. So instead of this endless negative spiral, you'll begin to form a positive habit of continuous improvements with small steps, and with this beating perfection. If you want to get a PDF of the notes of this video, use the link in my description to sign up for my newsletter. If you want more tips on creativity, check out my other videos. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something useful. Keep creating.